Today you're going to learn lesson 2.4, which is adding and subtracting decimals. When we are adding and subtracting decimals, there's two main things that we need to make sure we do. Okay, the first one we need to make sure we do is line up the decimals. The second thing we have to do, once we line up those decimals, is fill in empty place values with a 0. Fill in empty place values with 0. All right, so let's try some examples. We have 8 and 1300ths plus 2 and 6700ths. So first thing we're going to do is write that first number. Second thing I'm going to do is line up those decimals. Okay, so they're standing right on top of each other. I put my 2 in front, just like it is up here, and my 6, 7 behind that decimal, just like it is in our problem. We are adding, so then we're just going to add as normal. One thing we need to remember to do is bring down that decimal exactly underneath where the other two are. Then we just add. So we have 7 plus 3 is 10. Write our 0, carry our 1. We have 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 1 more is 8. We have 8 plus 2, which is 10. So our answer to this problem would be 10 and 80 hundredths, or 10 and 8 tenths. When we have zeros on the end of our decimals, it doesn't change the value, so we don't need them. But if you were to write either of these on a quiz, I would accept them. Okay. Let's try another one that's a little harder. We have 1 and 459 thousandths, and we're going to line up those decimals with 23 and 7 tenths. So my 23 is in front of that decimal. My 7 is after. All right, now my second thing I had to do, which I didn't have to do in the first problem, is to fill in these empty place values with a 0. Okay, because remember, like I was talking about over here, that 0 at the end of the decimal doesn't change the value. 23.7 is the same exact thing as 23.700. Doesn't change that number. Okay, and then we're just going to add as normal. 9 plus 0. Oops. I'm going to use a different color to make it stand out. And one thing that I did forget to do is drop down that decimal exactly down. 9 plus 0 is 9. 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 4 is 11, so we write our 1, carry a 1. Then we have 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 1 more is 5. And 2 plus nothing is 2. Our final answer here will be 25 and 159 thousandths. Okay. And that's adding. Adding is a little easier than subtracting, so let's try a couple subtracting problems, because when we get into subtracting, we have to do that borrowing. Okay, but same exact thing goes. We are going to first write our first number. Remember, with subtraction, we can't mix up the order, so this first number needs to be on top. Okay, and we're going to subtract 3 and 174 thousandths right here. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is drop down that decimal. I have 8 minus 4. Well, that's just 4. Here I have 0 minus 7, and I can't take away 7 from 0. Okay, if you have 0 cookies, I can't take 7 cookies away from you. So we need to borrow from the next place value and make it a 4. And we can make our 0 now a 10. We then take 10 minus 7 to get 3, and 4 minus 1 to get 3. 5 minus 3 to get 2. And our final answer would be 2 and 334 thousandths. All right, now number 4 is where it's going to start getting a little trickier. So I'm going to leave some extra space because we're going to need to do a lot of borrowing. Okay, so I'm going to drop it down a little. 21.9, 21 and 9 tenths. I'm going to take away 1 and 605 thousandths, making sure that we line up those decimals. first thing I do is drop down that decimal. Now I have to fill in empty spaces with zeros. Okay, we're going to see this is going to kind of get tricky when we have to fill in those zeros on the top, because then we can't take away numbers from 0. So we have to do a lot more borrowing. Okay, and some double borrowing, which gets tricky. So we can't take away 0 from 5. And we can't borrow 1 from the one next door because we have 0. So we have to jump on over to this 9 to make it an 8 in order to make this a 10. Okay. However, now this 0 needs to borrow 1 from this 10, so we make this 10 a 9. Okay, at this point, we then can make this 0 a 10. So we had to borrow from this neighbor, but we couldn't borrow from that 0 because it's 0 and didn't have any to borrow from. So we had to jump on over to this 9. We made the 9 an 8 to make this next 0 a 10. Okay, and then once it was a 10, we could then borrow from it for this first 0 by making it a 9. Okay, that's kind of that process that I just did. Now we can just subtract. So we have 10 minus 5, which is 5. 9 minus 0, which is 9. 8 minus 6, which is a 2. 1 minus 1, 0. And 2 minus nothing is 2. So our final answer here would be 20 and 295 thousandths. Trickiest part is when you have double zeros next to each other. You need to keep going until there's a number that you can borrow from. Then you make the next number a 10 and have to borrow from it to make it a 9. And then the next 0, you can make that 10. Okay, and you'll have a couple more examples like that. I want you to try number 5 and 6 on your own. Okay, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get it wrong. I'd rather have you try and make some mistakes and then correct them than to just watch me do it, because you're not learning anything then. Okay, so pause the video, try these on your own, then resume to check your answers. All right. First thing we're going to do is line up those decimals. 15.5, decimal 8.229. And we are adding, filling those empty place values with zeros. We have 0 plus 9 is 9. 2 plus 0 is 2. 5 plus 2 is 7. Bring down that decimal. 5 plus 8 gives us 13. Write our 3, carry our 1. 1 plus nothing is 1, plus our 1 that we carried is 2. Final answer for this problem would be 23 and 729 thousandths. All right, subtraction, 27. I'm going to drop it down because this one's going to have borrowing. Minus decimal 905. Fill in my place values with zeros. Here we go. Now this is that tricky one. Okay, we can't take away 5 from 0, and we can't borrow when we have a 0, so we have to make this 9 into an 8. Okay, once we make that into an 8, this now has 10. Okay, when we borrowed 1 from there, it made this one have 10. Now we can borrow for this 0. So this 0 needs to borrow from this 10 to make it a 9, and we make the first 0 a group of 10. Right. We take 10 minus 5, which is 5. 9 minus 0, which is 9. 8 minus 9 we can't do, so we have to borrow from the 7 to make it a 6. This then becomes an 18. 18 minus 9 is 9. 6 minus 0, 6. 2 minus 0, 2. We will get a final answer of 26 and 995 thousandths. All right. We're going to move on to some word problems. Here we have a word problem. Your meal at the school cafeteria costs $3.45. Your friend's meal costs $3.90. You want to pay for both meals with a $10 bill. We want to know how much change do you receive. Okay, so our important numbers in this problem, $3.45, $10 bill, and $3.90. Okay, to know how much I am totally going to be paying if I'm paying for mine and my friend's meal, is that I will have to add the cost of my meal to the cost of their meal. So I'm going to be adding the cost of my meal to the cost of my friend's meal. I have 5 plus 0, which is 5. 4 plus 9, which gives me a 13. Write my 3, carry my 1. Drop down my decimal. 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Okay, so the total cost of our 2 meals is $7.35. But that's not what the question's asking. The question's asking that if I pay with a $10 bill, how much change will I get back? So we are going to be taking 10 minus 7.35. One important thing to notice is when you have a whole number, that decimal goes after it. Okay, so if you have 7, that decimal goes here. If you have 63, the decimal goes after that last number on the right. Okay, if you have 514, that decimal goes after the 4. Okay. We can then fill empty places with zeros. Okay, now this is going to be a big borrowing problem. So I'm going to use another color again. We can't take away 5 from 0. We can't borrow from our neighbor because that's 0. We can't borrow from our next neighbor because that's 0. So we have to go all the way over to this 1 to make it a 0. Okay, we then make, from borrowing from that 0, this into a 10. But this neighbor needs to borrow, so we make it a 9 in order to make this guy a 10. Alright, and now this 0 needs to borrow from that 10, so we make that a 9. To last step, make this guy a 10. Alright, so we have to borrow from an actual number, which is why we have to keep borrowing farther and farther left, the more zeros we have. We then have 10 minus 5, which is 5. No, oops, that decimal does not go there. The decimal goes right here. 9 minus 3, which is 6. 9 minus 7, which is 2. And 0 minus 0, which is 0. Okay, so $2.65. So when we answer this question, we would say you receive $2.65 in change. All right. Let's do one more. Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, that's in Washington, D.C. looks like this right here. Okay, it's approximately rectangular. So for this problem, we're going to assume that it's a perfect rectangle. Okay, its width is 50.9 meters. Its length is 618.44 meters. Note that this is not drawn to scale, obviously. It is a lot smaller. You walk the perimeter of the pool. How many meters do you walk? Okay, perimeter is a very big keyword here in this problem. And perimeter, when we find the perimeter is like that distance outside. It's like a fence in a yard. Okay, so in order to find perimeter, you add all the sides together. Okay, so for this one, we're going to have to add 50.9 plus 618.44 plus 50.9 plus 618.44. Now you can choose to do this in steps. You could choose to group two numbers and then add on another one. And then find out that answer and then add on the last one. Or if you're feeling confident in your abilities to add decimals, you can just add them all at the same time. Biggest thing we need to make sure we do is make sure that all of our decimals line up. So now we have 618, 4, fill in my empty space with a 0. Then I have another 50.9, fill in my empty space with a 0. Then I have a 618.44. Notice how important it is to keep this nice and neat so that you know which numbers are in which columns to add with the other numbers. Okay. We are now going to just add. So our last column, 0 plus 4 plus 0 plus 4 gives us 8. 9 plus 4 is 13, plus another 9, 22, plus a 4, 26. Write our 6, carry our 2, drop down that decimal. 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 0 is still 10, plus 8 is 18. Write our 8, carry our 1. 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7, plus 5 is 12, plus 1 more is 13. Write our 3, carry our 1. Last but not least, we have 6 plus 6, which is 12, plus 1, 13. So we have 1,338 and 68 hundredths. To write this answer, we would say you walked 1,338 and 68 hundredths meters. Right. And that's going to wrap up our notes. So you can now work on your summary. In a couple sentences, just explain what you learned today, what the two main things that we have to do when we are adding or subtracting decimals, which we can refer to the top of our note page for those two if we need to. Otherwise, you can rewind, go back and watch any parts of the video that you are still confused on.